And now we're going to move from Latin America over to Europe and to a governing body, the EU Commission, more precisely to the Directorate General for Energy, where we will hear it from the team leader for Global North, Joanna Pessemier. Her and her colleagues' main priority is to ensure secure, sustainable and competitively priced energy for Europe, and clean energy, I might add. We've all heard of EU's Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. These are important instruments in reaching the net zero emissions target by 2050. Now, one question is whether the regulatory work is keeping up to speed. I know that Joanna Pessemier is ready, and she is in her office in Brussels. There will she give us an insight in DG Energy's current initiatives. And also to put these initiatives in a global context, as we can't see the energy transition isolated from one region to another. Obviously, in these turbulent times, an extra dimension is added to the equation, as we've talked about already, working to make Europe less dependent on Russian oil and gas as soon as possible. So good afternoon, Joanna. The digital scene is all yours. Take it away.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome from my home office this time, as the Commission continues teleworking for a bit. I'm really happy to be with you today to give you a perspective on our work and what colleagues before me mentioned, the need for the regulatory framework. Indeed, our work continues without stop, recently almost 24/7, so I'm excited to give you some updates on where exactly we are. Obviously, that has been certainly a topic of your exchange this morning. We cannot talk about energy transition without geopolitics of energy, and that geopolitics is more than ever knocking at our door, certainly for the past 4 weeks since the start of invasion by Russia on the sovereign territory of Ukraine. So with that, in the European Commission and in DG Energy, we are obviously facing a twofold challenge: how to deal with the short-term challenge, which is and has been communicated quite openly recently in the European Council conclusions of last week, but also in the Commission's communication from 3 weeks ago, which was how to diversify away from Russian fossil fuels, which is our objective, to reduce already our consumption of Russian fossil fuels by as far as 2/3 in the course of this year and eliminate them by 2027, how to ensure a secure supply of gas, and how to ensure that energy prices remain affordable, and on the other hand, to deliver the long term, so keep the eye on the ball, which is to deliver on the climate neutral EU by 2050, as the Commission pledged to do, to deliver on the Paris Agreement, and to implement as an intermediary step the European Green Deal. In all of that, we obviously have the international dimension surrounding us from all possible corners. And my team and my colleagues, we work jointly to translate the domestic regulatory policies of the EU in the energy sphere into the international dimension. And in that, I have a pleasure to be working in particular with Norway and several other countries from the so-called group of Global North. So where this takes us concretely, let me give you a quick overview of where exactly we are on the short-term challenge and how it actually takes us to the long term, because one actually does not exist without the other. In the short term, obviously, what is on everybody's mouth is the fossil fuels and the dependence on gas and external sources of supply. Despite all the efforts on the EU side, indeed, our external energy dependence on imports of fossil fuels amounted in 2020 to some 60%. So this has been highest in the 30 years measured so far. And that remains indeed an important bottleneck. However, the Commission and the EU has not been passive all these years. In the past years, we have invested a lot of energy into developing a framework that ensures that we have a better connected energy system in the EU, better connected infrastructure, better solidarity mechanisms, so that we actually can come to each other's help when that is necessary. That does not mean that the work has been achieved. Far from. As you see by the current crisis, there is much more work to do. And this is why in the Repower EU communication, the Commission has stepped up the game by indicating further factors and targets on how we can decrease that dependence, first of all, on Russian fossil fuels, and to reinforce the implementation of our objectives to achieve a climate neutral EU by 2050. So you will see that actually, if we were to deliver on the current framework, the so-called Fit for 55, where some of the proposals are still pending before the co-legislators, and that I will mention in a moment, we could already reduce our dependence on fossil fuels by 30%, so something like 100 billion cubic meters by 2030, only by implementing the proposals already in front of the legislators. But of course, what needs to be happening now is that we need to accelerate. And everyone is going to ask certainly the question how this is going to be done. So obviously, in the short term, we do plan to reach out to all international partners that are able to support us on further enhanced deliveries for LNG. We will promote joint gas purchase for the moment on a voluntary basis, pending a resolution by the co-legislators of a proposal on how to ensure coordinated gas purchases and coordinated refilling of storages ahead of next winter and the winters to come. And of course, we will double down now on implementing the European Green Deal, which is to accelerate even further the work to implement in our domestic systems better measures for energy efficiency, increase even further the uptake of renewable energy, and move to new sources such as hydrogen. Now, the energy prices, obviously, a word on that, is something that is at the centerpiece of our attention. We have developed a number of ways to assist the member states who have the burden of addressing the problem, but the Commission has been sustaining the member states with a number of analytical tools and providing them with the ways of how the prices can be mitigated in the short term to relieve the burden, in particular on the poorer households. And there are indeed many ways in which that can be done. But we will be also looking at the electricity market design. We are looking forward to the report of the Agency of European Regulators that in a month's time will provide us with suggestions as to whether the electricity market, the way it is designed today, should be somehow reviewed and perhaps corrected. That remains yet to be seen. There is also a gas storage proposal on the table, which will also reduce the elements of dependence of the member states and increase cooperation such that in the moment of shortfalls in the winter, which inevitably has driven the prices this winter, we can actually better spread the gas available in our storages. And finally, the member states will be working closely with the Commission and the Commission with the member states in the coming months to see how exactly country by country we can implement these additional ambitious proposals to tackle the short term. Let me move to the long term. I will show you the graph that has been underpinning our analysis for the proposals to remove greenhouse gases in the EU by 55% until 2030. And what you see in front of you, obviously, are the different policy scenarios and different modeling tools that we used in order to compare results of what it would mean to reduce the greenhouse consumption by 55% by 2030. And on that graph, I would want just to attract your attention to two things. On the right-hand side of the graph, where you see the 2050, you will see the very large blue share in all of the scenarios by 2050. This is the increased electrification of our energy system. The other element, the projection and the ambition, therefore, that underpins our legislative proposals is what you see also on the very bottom of that graph in the part undertitled 2050. This is the very reduced share of fossil fuels, which is coal, oil, and natural gas, and gradual replacement of those components by hydrogen, by synthetic gases, and finally also by energy efficiency, because ultimately the best insurance policy for the future and to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels is to actually reduce our consumption. Now, all of this takes us to a very, very challenging time, which has been, in fact, in our directorate for the past 4 years or so, which is to incredibly speed up the regulatory framework such that it is really fit, not only for the 55 objective, but it is fit for the future. The graph you see is basically a plethora of about 14 legislative proposals that have been tabled since 2019 by the various departments of the European Commission to collectively deliver the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. For the EU, for the Department on Energy, this means specifically 2 proposals to enhance further our targets for reducing our energy efficiency consumption. To reduce our use of energy to enhance greater efficiency and to reduce consumption altogether of that energy. And on the other hand, is to increase rapidly the uptake of renewable energy. Now, this means there is, of course, more than that. It's just those 2 pieces of legislation is just, let's say, a tip of the iceberg, because beyond that, in light of the current events, we have been actually raising up the level of ambition. The Renewable Energy Directive and Energy Efficiency Directive that are supposed to drive the efforts of all member states, of industry, and of consumers together to further reduce our CO2 emissions and increase the uptake of renewables. That level of ambition is therefore being driven up by increasing the targets. And that has proven to be a useful tool to send a signal to the investment world, to the consumers, to the member states alike, that there is a need to speed up the efforts. And that message has worked, because for 2020, the objectives we already had back at the time to reduce our energy consumption, increase energy efficiency by 20%, and to increase the uptake of renewables by 20%, that target has been achieved. Renewable electricity today is 38% of the total electricity produced in the EU. And in 2020, for the first time, the renewable electricity has surpassed the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity. So this turning point, I think, is already being reached. The question is now to speed up the work that we are doing and ensure that there is sufficient investment and sufficient signals are being sent to domestic constituencies of the member states and to the business world and to the consumers alike. So we are driving our ambition further. We have now a set of proposals to increase the performance of buildings. You will know that the buildings emissions compose about 40% of all the energy consumption in the EU. So the potential to increase energy efficiency of buildings, the performance of those buildings, is extremely high. But there is also an element of reducing other emissions. For the first time, we've tabled a proposal to reduce also methane emissions in the energy sector, methane being one of the most potent gases and even more damaging actually than CO2. So that proposal is currently with the co-legislators on the table, but that is not all. Last December, we tabled a new framework to decarbonize our gases, to promote biomethane, to promote synthetic gases, and to create a real regulatory framework for hydrogen, both in terms of import of hydrogen, but also import of ammonia from our neighborhood, but also further around the globe. And we are sending signals to the industry and to the investors by saying that the new infrastructure that you plan to build must be future-proof. It must be hydrogen compatible. It must be enabling us to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels to zero by 2050. With that, we have also provided last autumn a largely debated taxonomy framework. I'm sure you have heard about that. That is a framework that basically provides a signal to the investment world that investments that support fossil fuel infrastructure are no longer welcome in the net zero world, are not welcome in the EU. And that has been a widely debated issue, as you probably know well, but the one that has been really necessary to use all the tools we have at our disposal to move towards a carbon-free future. Now, a lot of those proposals are literally, as we speak, on the table of the co-legislators. And obviously, they enjoy a great interest of various partners around the world. I have the pleasure of being among colleagues who have several opportunities to discuss those frameworks with different partners, with Canada, United States, of course, Norway, Japan, Korea, African countries, you name it. And those legislative packages obviously are complemented by a plethora of strategies that I will not even mention any further. Let me go further to just close up on one element. My predecessor in this panel has mentioned rightly the financing. The graph you see in front of you is an old one in a sense. It is a graph that shows how private and public spending on innovation has been shaping up until 2018. There are two conclusions from that. One is that the private world really is the driver of the of the investments in clean energy. That is not going to be a surprising element. But the one that is indeed work for the future is the share of public spending on R&D. In 2018, that figure has been at about 5% of the total spending you could see. So this amounts to roughly a few billion euros per year. This is not going to take us to the next step. So this is why in the context of the post-COVID recovery, the EU has been working very hard, and Commission has prepared a number of proposals which were then accepted by the member states to rapidly and dramatically increase the public financing and the public spending on clean energy transition. And we have two instruments which are then translated in a number of instruments, but let me just quote you those two figures. The Next Generation EU is the name of the program that is supposed to help member states recover from the effects of the pandemics. And with that, we have nothing less than 800 billion euros. That is a package that is supposed to stimulate the recovery of our economies. And the 30% of that package is meant to support clean energy, climate change objectives. So not just clean energy, but of course, environment, sustainable agriculture, what have you. But the clean energy component is very prominent there. And we are discussing in great detail with member states how those can be implemented in practice. And the second is, of course, the multi-annual budget of the EU. That budget proportionately is, of course, a small element of the total EU expenditure. It's a little bit more than 1% of the total available finances across the whole of the EU, but it is 1,210 billion euros, out of which, again, 30% is supposed to go to climate change objectives. So certainly, the public financing has to be scaled up, and there is a room for maneuver. But I think both on the regulatory sphere as well as on the financing end, we are moving, and we are really keen to close the gap to provide the sustainability and the clean energy perspective for the future generations. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.